What comes to mind when you hear the word creative? For most people, it's an image of someone wildly talented, maybe a painter, a musician, or a tech visionary coming up with a brilliant idea in the middle of the night. It seems like creativity is something mysterious, something magical, something reserved for a chosen few. But that idea couldn't be further from the truth. Creativity isn't a gift, it's a habit, a way of thinking, seeing, and engaging with the world. It's not something you're born with or without. It's something you cultivate, shape, and strengthen through consistent practice. The problem is, we've been taught to treat creativity like a rare spark. We wait for inspiration to strike, as if we're powerless until it arrives. And when it doesn't come, we assume we're not the creative type. But the truth is, the spark comes after you start working, not before. Creativity isn't about being struck by brilliance. It's about creating the space and the structure for ideas to emerge. It's about showing up when it's hard, when it's boring, when it's messy, especially then. Because the people who create remarkable things, the authors, the inventors, the artists, the entrepreneurs, aren't always the most talented. They're often the most disciplined. They've built daily rituals that make creativity part of their life, not just a moment of luck. They've learned to sit through the discomfort, to keep going when the ideas feel dull, and to trust that progress isn't about instant results, but about consistent movement. You don't need a big breakthrough to get started. You just need to begin. This audiobook is here to help you do exactly that, to stop waiting for creativity to arrive and start building the habits that bring it to life. You'll discover simple, powerful practices that make space for ideas to grow. You'll learn how to overcome self-doubt, stay consistent, and tap into your own unique voice, even when it feels like you have nothing to say. No matter who you are or what you do, creativity is relevant. It's how you solve problems, how you connect with others, how you bring energy into your work, and how you shape a life that reflects your values and imagination. So don't wait for permission. Don't wait for genius. Start small. Start today and discover that your creative potential isn't something you find, it's something you practice into existence. Chapter 1. The Myth of the Creative Genius: Why Daily Practice Matters. We've been told a story over and over again about what it means to be creative, and most of us have believed it. The story goes like this. Some people are simply born creative. They have a gift, a special mind, a spark that others don't. These are the geniuses who wake up with brilliant ideas, who sit down and effortlessly paint, write, compose, or invent. They wait for inspiration, and it always seems to come. The rest of us, we're left to admire them from a distance, convinced we don't have what it takes. This myth, the myth of the creative genius, is seductive. It gives us an excuse. If creativity is a matter of talent or divine luck, then we don't have to try. We don't have to be vulnerable. We don't have to risk failing at something creative. We can just say, "I'm not creative," and move on. But here's the truth. Most of what we call genius is really the result of consistent, patient, often invisible practice. Behind every overnight success is a decade of quiet work. Behind every great idea is 100 discarded ones. Behind every breakthrough is a long stretch of showing up when nothing seemed to be working. Creativity isn't a flash of lightning. It's the result of daily discipline. Let's take a few real-world examples. Pablo Picasso, one of the most celebrated artists in history, is said to have created more than 50,000 works of art in his lifetime. That's not magic, that's volume. That's showing up day after day, exploring, experimenting, making good work, bad work, and everything in between. Stephen King, one of the most successful authors in the world, writes every single day, including holidays, not because he's always inspired, but because he's trained himself to show up. He once said, "Amateurs sit and wait for inspiration. The rest of us Just get up and go to work. Even in science and invention, the story is the same. Thomas Edison conducted over 1,000 failed experiments before inventing the light bulb. His genius wasn't in finding the right solution immediately. It was in continuing to search despite constant setbacks. These people didn't wait for creativity. They practiced it. So why do we still believe the myth? Because we love the idea of effortless brilliance. It's more romantic. It saves us from facing the truth that creative work, like any meaningful work, takes persistence, patience, and showing up when it's hard. But this myth doesn't just hold us back, it makes us miserable. If you believe that creative people are born, not made, then every time you struggle, you assume it means you don't have what it takes. You look at your early drafts, your failed attempts, your messy experiments, and instead of seeing them as necessary steps in the process, you see them as proof that you're not a real creative person. That kind of thinking kills more ideas than failure ever could. Because the real enemy of creativity isn't lack of talent, it's unrealistic expectations. It's the belief that creativity should come easily, that your ideas should work on the first try, that if you were truly good, it wouldn't feel this hard. But what if hard is normal? What if struggle is part of the process? What if the real secret of creative people isn't that they're more talented, but that they're more resilient? That's where daily practice comes in. Daily practice is how you bypass perfectionism. It's how you stop waiting and start creating. When you commit to showing up regardless of how you feel, you take the power away from fear, doubt, and resistance. Daily practice doesn't mean grinding for hours. It doesn't mean producing a masterpiece every day. It means creating space consistently for your creativity to live, breathe, and evolve. You don't need a 3-hour ritual. You just need a small, dependable window of time that's dedicated to showing up. Maybe that's 20 minutes of journaling every morning. Maybe it's a sketch on your lunch break. Maybe it's sitting in silence and brainstorming after dinner. The action matters far more than the length of time. Over time, this consistency becomes your foundation. It creates safety, it builds momentum, and it gives you something many people never develop: a creative identity. Because the more you create, the more you start to see yourself as a creator. You stop saying, "I want to be a writer," and start saying, "I write." You stop saying, "I wish I had ideas," and start realizing, "I make time for ideas." You begin to trust yourself, not because you always produce great work, but because you always return to the work. Daily practice also teaches you to let go of outcome. You stop needing every session to be brilliant. You learn that some days will feel flat, others will surprise you, and most will be somewhere in between. But they all matter. Because what really matters isn't what you create on any single day. It's who you become over time through the act of creating. That's the shift. That's the liberation. When you stop trying to be a genius and start trying to be genuine. When you stop waiting for inspiration and start building a rhythm. When you stop seeking validation and start showing up for the sake of the process. Your creativity doesn't live in rare, exceptional moments. It lives in the ordinary moments you choose to return to the page, the canvas, the notebook, the idea again and again. So forget the myth. Forget the idea that creativity is a mystery only some people are allowed to touch. You don't need permission. You need practice. Start small, start simple, but start now. And keep starting every day. Because the secret isn't brilliance. It's consistency. And with enough consistency, your creativity won't just unlock, it will unfold. And here's something else we often overlook. Creativity is not limited to the arts. You don't need to be a painter or a poet to benefit from daily creative practice. Creativity shows up in how you lead a team, solve a complex business problem, write an email, design a lesson, or even handle conflict in a relationship. It's the way you think, adapt, and respond to challenges. It's the lens through which you bring life, novelty, and value into the world. This is why daily creative practice matters not just for artists, but for everyone. It sharpens your mind, it builds your ability to generate ideas, test possibilities, and trust your instincts. The more you train your creative thinking, the more confident and resilient you become across every area of life. But here's where many people get stuck. They assume that creative practice must be tied to output, that if they're not producing something polished or shareable, it's not worth doing. This mindset traps people in performance mode. You start worrying about whether it's good, whether it's original, whether it'll get attention. And in doing so, you forget the most important thing. The purpose of practice is not perfection, it's growth. Think about a musician warming up. They don't play their best song right away. They go through scales, slow repetitions, or rough improvisations. Not to impress anyone, but to loosen the mind, to build muscle memory, to reconnect with their instrument. Your creative practice is the same. Some days it will flow. Other days it will feel like dragging yourself uphill. But both days matter. Both days count. Because practice doesn't just improve your skill, it strengthens your relationship with the work. It builds a kind of creative trust that you can sit with uncertainty, explore without judgment, and allow yourself to make something not because it's perfect, but because it's honest. And over time, this trust compounds. You stop fearing the blank page. You stop seeing imperfection as failure. You begin to embrace the process for what it is, a long, winding, beautiful path toward mastery. Let's return to that word mastery. Most people think mastery means you've arrived, that you're at the top of your field, producing excellent work every time. But real mastery is much simpler and much humbler. It's the willingness to return to the fundamentals, day after day. It's the choice to keep learning, experimenting, refining. It's the understanding that creativity is not about arriving somewhere. It's about staying engaged with the journey. So instead of chasing genius, chase depth. Instead of trying to be brilliant, try being present. Instead of needing every session to produce something great, allow every session to build something greater inside you. Discipline, clarity, courage. And remember this, the more you practice, the more you become. Not only more skilled, but more alive, more attuned, more connected to your ideas, your purpose, your potential. Because ultimately, creativity is not just about what you make, it's about who you become by choosing to make something every day, even when it's hard, even when it's imperfect, even when no one's watching. Especially then. Chapter 2. Creating the conditions for creativity to thrive. Creativity doesn't happen in a vacuum. It needs an environment to grow both internally and externally. You can have all the potential in the world, but if the conditions around you constantly block, distract, or drain you, your creative energy will wither before it ever has the chance to take root. Imagine trying to light a candle in a storm. The spark is there, but the conditions won't let the flame catch. The same is true for your ideas. They need shelter, support, and space. That's why creating the right conditions is not optional, it's essential. You don't need a perfect studio, endless time, or total silence. But you do need intentionality. The world isn't designed to protect your creativity, you have to design it for yourself. Let's begin with the most obvious, yet often overlooked element, your physical space. The environment you create in directly influences how your mind behaves. Cluttered, chaotic surroundings create mental static. A desk covered with to-do lists, unfinished tasks, and distractions sends a message to your brain. This is where stress lives. Now, this doesn't mean you need an Instagram-worthy minimalist setup, but it does mean you need to make your space purposeful. Ask yourself, does this area invite me into clarity, focus, and imagination, or does it pull me into avoidance and anxiety? Even simple changes, clearing your workspace, Adding natural light, placing a single object that inspires you can shift your entire mindset. Your creative space should feel like an invitation, not an obstacle. But physical space is only part of the equation. Just as important is your mental space. We live in an age of constant noise notifications, headlines, opinions, content. Your mind is bombarded with inputs from the moment you wake up. And when your mental space is overloaded, your creative system shuts down. It can't wander, explore, or connect ideas when it's drowning in noise. That's why mental boundaries are crucial. Consider starting your day without reaching for your phone. Give your mind 20 minutes of stillness before letting the outside world in. During this quiet window, ideas emerge. Your brain begins to process and synthesize in ways it can't when constantly reacting. You don't have to eliminate digital life, but you do need to contain it. Set specific times to consume information, and more importantly, to disconnect from it. If your mental space is always open to everything, it won't have the depth required for meaningful creation. Next, let's talk about time. You don't need huge blocks of uninterrupted time to be creative. In fact, some of the most prolific creators work in short, focused bursts. What matters more than the length of time is the quality of presence you bring to it. The key is to protect creative time like it's sacred. That means scheduling it, naming it, defending it. If you don't make time, the world will take it. You'll always find something else to do. Emails, errands, meetings, scrolling. The urgent will always try to bury the important, and creativity rarely feels urgent. But that doesn't mean it's not essential. By carving out regular windows for creative work, even just 30 minutes a day, you send yourself a powerful message. My ideas matter. This is where rituals come in. A ritual doesn't need to be complex. It can be as simple as making tea, lighting a candle, opening a specific notebook, or playing a certain song. The point is to train your brain. This is our time to create. Rituals anchor you. They make the shift from distraction to focus smoother. Over time, your body and mind begin to associate the ritual with creative engagement. You enter the space more easily, more fully. In the same way that athletes warm up before a game, creative rituals prepare your mind to enter flow. They reduce resistance, hesitation, and noise. Now, let's explore something deeper, your emotional space. Fear, self-doubt, perfectionism. These are the silent killers of creativity, and while they may never fully disappear, you can create an emotional environment that makes it safer to begin. That means replacing judgment with curiosity. Instead of asking, "Is this idea good enough?" ask, "Where could this idea go if I gave it room?" Instead of pressuring yourself to produce something perfect, give yourself permission to explore. Emotional safety is essential. If your creative practice is built on shame, pressure, or the constant need to prove yourself, it will eventually collapse. But if it's built on self-compassion, courage, and playfulness, it will thrive. This is why your inner dialogue matters. The words you speak to yourself while you create shape your experience more than you realize. If you say, "This is stupid," you close doors. If you say, "This is interesting," you open them. Your creative energy responds to encouragement. Treat yourself the way you would treat a friend who's trying something new, cheering them on, reminding them it's okay to stumble, celebrating their willingness to try. Also, be aware of energy drains in your environment. Certain people, habits, or routines can subtly sap your focus and confidence. Maybe it's the social media account that always makes you compare yourself. Maybe it's a cluttered inbox. Maybe it's multitasking when deep work is needed. Audit your environment internally and externally. Identify what nurtures your creativity and what strangles it. Then make intentional shifts. That might mean turning off notifications, creating a tech-free corner, saying no to commitments that steal your mental bandwidth, spending time in nature or silence, surrounding yourself with people who value creativity, even if they don't share your discipline. And finally, let's talk about permission. Many people wait to feel ready before they begin. They wait for validation, for a sign, for someone to say, yes, you're allowed to create. But creativity doesn't come from permission, it comes from ownership. You don't need to earn the right to explore your imagination. You don't need to be a published writer to write. You don't need to be a professional designer to sketch. You don't need to monetize your art to make it meaningful. The act of creating is valuable in and of itself. When you stop waiting for permission and start creating your own conditions, everything changes. You no longer wait for the world to give you the green light. You build your own path. You make space. You light your own candle in the storm and you protect it. Because creativity doesn't thrive in chaos. It thrives in structure. It thrives in safety. It thrives in intention. And the good news is, you don't need to wait for the perfect moment to build those conditions. You can begin today. You can begin now. With a small adjustment to your space. With a shift in how you speak to yourself. With a few minutes of time you claim for yourself. Creativity isn't a switch you flip. It's a climate you cultivate. And once you've created the right environment internally and externally, your ideas will grow not because you force them to, but because you've given them everything they need to flourish. Chapter 3. Building Creative Habits: Consistency over Intensity. When most people think of creativity, they imagine breakthroughs, flashes of insight, waves of inspiration, moments of unstoppable energy. They picture long weekends lost in artistic flow, all-nighters driven by genius, or dramatic bursts of productivity that leave behind a masterpiece. But that picture, while romantic, is misleading. Creative breakthroughs do happen, but they are rare. They are not the foundation of a creative life. What builds real, sustainable creativity is not intensity, it's consistency. If you want to become a writer, it's not about writing one perfect chapter in a weekend. It's about writing every day, even when the words feel clumsy. If you want to develop design skills, it's not about spending 10 hours on one epic piece. It's about sketching for 15 minutes daily. If you want to become more imaginative in your work, it's not about going to a creativity seminar once a year. It's about training your thinking patterns week by week. Because creativity, like fitness, responds best to steady, repeated effort. You don't get strong by going to the gym once and lifting weights until you collapse. You get strong by showing up regularly and building from there. The same is true for your creative mind. It grows through rhythm, not occasional bursts. Why does this matter so much? Because the lie of intensity keeps people stuck. It tells them they need big blocks of time, perfect conditions, or magical motivation before they can start creating. So they wait, they plan, they overthink. They wait for the right moment, and it rarely comes. But the truth is, you don't need long hours to make progress. You just need daily contact with your creative practice. That daily contact builds trust. Every time you show up, even if the work isn't good, you reinforce a deeper message to yourself. I am a creator. This matters. I return to it because it's part of who I am. Let's take a closer look at what building creative habits actually looks like. First, it starts with making it small. One of the biggest barriers to consistency is trying to do too much too soon. You think, if I don't have an hour to write, it's not worth it. But that thinking kills momentum. It ties your progress to your schedule instead of your commitment. Start with something you can't fail. One paragraph, one sketch, one idea on paper. The point is not to impress, it's to stay in motion. When you remove the pressure of scale, you remove the resistance to starting. Second, attach your creative habit to an anchor, something already stable in your day. Maybe it's journaling for 10 minutes after your morning coffee, or sketching during your commute, or recording a voice memo while walking your dog. Habits are more likely to stick when they're tied to something familiar. They stop feeling like extra effort and start feeling like part of your rhythm. Next, track your streak, not your perfection. You don't need to create a masterpiece every day. You just need to keep the chain alive. Use a calendar, a notebook, an app, whatever works for you. And when you see that unbroken chain of effort, day after day, something powerful happens. You build identity. You start to see yourself not as someone trying to be creative, but as someone who is creative because the evidence is right in front of you. And when a day gets missed, as it inevitably will, don't punish yourself. Don't spiral into guilt. Just begin again the next day. Because what matters isn't how perfect the habit is. It's how automatic it becomes over time. Let's also talk about low-friction tools. If your habit is too complex or inconvenient, it won't last. Set up your environment in a way that makes starting easy. Keep your notebook visible. Place your instrument near your workspace. Open a blank document when you finish your session, so it's ready the next day. Remove as many decisions as possible. The more you have to think about how to begin, the less likely you are to begin at all. Another important mindset shift is to focus on process over product. Too often, people get discouraged because their daily output doesn't seem impressive. But daily practice is not about creating something amazing each time. It's about creating space for something amazing to eventually emerge. Your job is not to judge each session. Your job is to keep showing up and let the work evolve naturally. Some days will feel flat. Others will surprise you, but all of them count. In fact, most breakthroughs come when you're not expecting them, when you're halfway through a session that started slow, when you're on day 13 of a 30-day challenge, when you almost didn't show up, but did anyway. That's the magic of consistency. It creates more chances for unexpected brilliance. Now, let's be honest, maintaining a habit isn't always easy. Life gets busy, energy dips, doubt creeps in. That's why systems matter more than motivation. You won't always feel inspired. But if you've built a system, a time, a place, a method, you don't need to rely on how you feel. You just follow the structure. You keep the appointment with yourself. This is where accountability can help. Tell a friend about your habit. Join a creative group. Share your progress online if that motivates you. You don't need external validation, but sometimes knowing someone else is cheering for you helps you stay on track. Let's not forget the emotional benefits of consistency. When you show up every day for your creative work, something else begins to happen inside you. You start to feel centered, grounded, reconnected to your deeper self. You begin to enjoy the act of creating, not just the result. You start looking forward to those quiet moments with your own ideas, your own voice, your own imagination. And perhaps most importantly, you begin to trust yourself. You know you'll come back to the work. You know you'll make time for what matters. You know you can create even when it's hard because you've proven it day after day. This kind of trust can't be bought. It's earned through practice, persistence, and presence. So if you've been waiting for the perfect time, stop waiting. Start small. Start now. 5 minutes today beats 2 hours never. A single page today beats the perfect plan postponed. Because the only way to build a creative life is to live it moment by moment, choice by choice, one imperfect session at a time. You don't need to be intense. You need to be steady. Because in the end, it's not the most brilliant who finish the work. It's the ones who keep coming back. Let's now explore another powerful but often overlooked aspect of habit building, the role of identity. When you start practicing something consistently, your brain doesn't just register what you do, it begins to reshape your sense of who you are. And this is critical, because identity drives behavior far more deeply than goals or intentions ever will. If you say, "I'm trying to be creative," you're still framing creativity as something external, something you're pursuing, something uncertain. But when you say, I am a creative person, your brain begins to align your actions, choices, and energy with that identity. How does this relate to habit? Every time you sit down to sketch, write, think, design, problem solve, or play, you cast a vote for the kind of person you're becoming. One page written is a vote for, I am a writer. One idea explored is a vote for, I am a problem solver. One small act of curiosity is a vote for, I am creative. You don't need to prove your identity in a single leap. You build it slowly, steadily, through repetition. The more consistent you are, the more evidence you give yourself that this isn't just a phase, it's part of you. And once that belief is internalized, the behavior becomes natural. It becomes less about forcing yourself to act creative and more about remembering who you are and returning to it. This shift also helps with motivation during hard days. When you feel stuck, you don't ask, do I feel like creating today? Instead, you ask, what would a creative person do right now? And you follow through not because it's easy, but because it aligns with who you've decided to be. This is the quiet power of creative habit. It builds both action and identity. And as your identity deepens, so does your resilience. Because the road of creativity is full of uncertainty. There will be setbacks, off days, and doubt. But when creativity is no longer just something you do, and instead something you are, you keep going. You persist not out of pressure, but from alignment. And that's what transforms a habit from a chore into a rhythm, from a goal into a lifestyle, from a hope into a truth. So keep showing up not for the outcome, not for the applause, not for the perfect product, but for the daily act of becoming. Every habit, every return, every creative choice is shaping something far greater than any single work you'll make. It's shaping you. Chapter 4. Managing Fear, Doubt, and Resistance. Every creative journey eventually runs into the same three obstacles: fear, doubt, and resistance. It doesn't matter whether you're writing a book, starting a business, designing a product, or painting your first canvas. These inner forces show up like clockwork the moment you try to do something meaningful. They whisper in your mind, this isn't good enough. You're wasting your time. Someone else has already done it better. Who do you think you are? These voices are not unique to you. They are part of the creative process. In fact, they are signs that you're doing something important, something that requires vulnerability, courage, and personal investment. Because fear doesn't show up when you're playing it safe. It shows up when you're stepping into the unknown. The problem isn't that fear and doubt exist. The problem is when you believe them. Let's start with fear. Fear is not the enemy. In fact, it can be a helpful signal. It often points you toward the edge of your comfort zone, where growth and creative expansion live. But fear becomes harmful when it takes the wheel, when it stops you before you begin, when it convinces you that you're not ready, not qualified, not capable. To manage fear, you don't need to eliminate it. You need to relate to it differently. Start by naming it. What are you actually afraid of? Failure, judgment, rejection, wasting time, discovering that you're not as good as you hoped? Put it into words. Write it down. When fear stays vague and unspoken, it grows. But when you name it, you shrink its power. You take something foggy and emotional and make it specific and logical. Next, ask, is this fear trying to protect me? Because often it is. Fear doesn't want you to fail. It doesn't want you to be embarrassed. It's trying to keep you safe. That's its job. But safety and growth rarely live in the same room. You have to thank your fear for its concern and keep going anyway. Now, let's move to doubt. Doubt is quieter than fear, but just as dangerous. Doubt doesn't scream, it undermines. It plants little thoughts like, maybe this isn't worth it, or you're not really that creative, or what if no one cares? Doubt loves to show up in the middle of a project, You've started, maybe even built momentum, and suddenly everything looks wrong. You question the idea. You criticize your skills. You consider quitting not because the work is bad, but because doubt has taken over the steering wheel. Here's the truth. Doubt thrives in isolation. When you keep your creative process hidden, you give doubt more room to distort your perspective. That's why sharing your work, even in small, safe ways, can be powerful. A trusted friend, a supportive group, a personal mentor. When someone else sees value in your work, even when you can't, it reminds you that your inner critic doesn't hold all the truth. You can also counter doubt with data. Look at your progress. Look at what you've learned, what you've created, what you've overcome. Keep a creative wins. List a small notebook or file where you record every positive step, no matter how small. Finished a draft? Wrote for 10 days in a row? Got positive feedback? Add it to the list. Over time, this record of progress becomes armor against the voice of doubt. It reminds you that while doubt is loud, you are consistent. And then there's the big one, resistance. Resistance is that invisible wall you feel when you sit down to start. It's the procrastination, the sudden urge to clean your room, scroll endlessly, or dive into less important tasks. Resistance doesn't feel like fear or doubt, it feels like avoidance. You know you want to work, you even feel excited about it, but something inside just won't let you start. This is where routine becomes your ally. You don't beat resistance with willpower. You beat it with rhythm, with structure, with rituals that cue your brain. This is when we begin. Start by making the first step ridiculously easy. Open the document. Sit in the chair. Set a 5-minute timer. Tell yourself you don't have to write the chapter, just the first sentence. Most of the time, that small beginning breaks the inertia. Once you've started, momentum takes over. It's the starting that's hard, not the doing. Another trick is to lower the stakes. Resistance thrives when we put too much pressure on a single session. We think, this needs to be amazing, or this has to justify all the time I've spent. But creativity dies under pressure. Instead, tell yourself, this is just practice. This is just me showing up today. It doesn't need to be great, it just needs to exist. That mindset shift creates room. Room to be messy, room to discover, room to actually enjoy the process. And finally, understand that fear, doubt, and resistance are not signs that you're doing something wrong. They're signs that you're doing something right. They show up for every creative person. The ones who succeed aren't those who never feel them, but those who keep creating in their presence. Let's look at a metaphor. Imagine you're driving a car, and fear hops in the passenger seat. Doubt gets in the back. Resistance is somewhere in the trunk, making noise. They're annoying, distracting, but they don't get to steer. You acknowledge them. You say, I see you, I hear you, but I'm still driving. That's what courage looks like. Not creating without fear, but creating despite it. Because when you do, something incredible happens. Fear begins to respect you. Doubt quiets down. Resistance gets bored. And slowly, your creative path becomes clearer, not because it's easier, but because you've proven you can walk it. Let's not pretend this is a one-time fix. These forces return again and again, especially as your work grows, as you take bigger risks, as you aim higher. But every time they show up, you show up too. You show up with your tools, your routine, your growing identity, your resilience. And you keep creating, not because it's always easy, but because it's worth it. Not because you're fearless, but because you're faithful to the work. And that's the difference between someone who talks about being creative and someone who lives it. So the next time fear shows up, greet it. The next time doubt whispers, smile at it. The next time resistance builds a wall, take one small step through it. Because beyond that wall is your best work. And every time you walk through, you're not just creating something valuable, you're becoming someone unstoppable. Chapter 5. Letting boredom and curiosity fuel innovation. We live in a world that fears boredom. We carry devices in our pockets that offer instant entertainment, endless scrolling, and dopamine on demand. We've been conditioned to fill every gap, every silence, every idle moment with stimulation. Waiting in line, check your phone, walking down the street, put on a podcast, sitting in traffic, scroll social media. Even brushing your teeth comes with the option to multitask. And yet, in our attempt to avoid boredom at all costs, we've also blocked one of creativity's most powerful allies. Because while it may seem counterintuitive, boredom can be the doorway to innovation. Boredom is not the enemy. Boredom is the signal. It's your brain saying, "There's nothing new coming in. Let's go inward. Let's start making something." In other words, boredom is what happens when the outside world quiets and your inner world begins to speak. When you allow yourself to sit in that space without reaching for distraction, your mind starts doing what it was designed to do: wander, connect, imagine, explore. It sifts through fragments of thoughts, memories, observations, and questions, and suddenly, something new starts to emerge. That's how ideas are born, not in a rush of stimulation, but in a moment of space. Let's look at a simple but powerful example. Daydreaming. Most people think daydreaming is unproductive, but research shows that it's actually a powerful form of mental activity. It's the brain's way of creating new associations, solving problems in the background, and accessing deeper layers of thought. Many famous discoveries and breakthroughs came from moments of idle thought, not from staring hard at a problem, but from letting go. The philosopher Nietzsche took long daily walks in silence, using boredom as a thinking tool. Steve Jobs often spoke about the importance of bored moments in creative thinking. Even Einstein credited imagination and quiet thought as essential to his discoveries. So the question is not, how do I avoid boredom, but rather, how can I leverage boredom as part of my creative process? One way to begin is to build intentional space into your day. This doesn't mean doing nothing for hours. It means reclaiming pockets of silence. Choose one moment each day, perhaps your morning coffee, a walk, or the time before bed, to put your devices away and simply be. No music, no scrolling, no filling the gap, just you and your thoughts. At first, it may feel uncomfortable. That's normal. We're so used to distraction that stillness can feel like restlessness. But if you stay with it, if you allow that discomfort to settle, you'll start to notice a shift. Your thoughts will deepen. Ideas will begin to surface. Your mental clutter will start to clear. And in that space, curiosity awakens. Curiosity is the engine of creativity. It's what pulls you forward when certainty is missing. It's what invites you to ask, explore, test, and play. And like boredom, curiosity thrives in space. Children are naturally curious because they haven't been trained to fear not knowing. They wander, poke, dig, ask, and imagine. They don't need a reason, they follow interest. And in doing so, they discover new connections the adult mind might overlook. As adults, we often suppress this curiosity because we're so focused on being productive, right, or efficient. But innovation doesn't come from efficiency, it comes from exploration. And exploration begins with curiosity. The good news? You can train curiosity. You can build it like a muscle. Start by practicing curious questions in your daily life. Instead of saying, "That won't work," try asking, "What if it did?" Instead of assuming, ask, "Why is it that way?" Or, "What would happen if I flipped this upside down?" Curiosity isn't about having all the answers. It's about being open to possibilities. You can also train curiosity by exposing yourself to new inputs, especially outside your usual field. Read a book in a genre you normally avoid. Take a class on something unrelated to your work. Talk to someone from a completely different background. Innovation often comes from cross-pollination, connecting ideas that aren't normally linked. In fact, many groundbreaking inventions came from one field borrowing from another. Velcro was inspired by burrs stuck to a dog's fur. The first computer algorithm was written by a woman studying mathematics and music. The best innovators aren't just deep thinkers, they're wide thinkers. They stay open, they stay curious. Now, let's talk about how boredom and curiosity work together. Boredom creates the space. Curiosity fills it with questions. Together, they set the stage for imaginative leaps. When your mind is still and your questions are alive, creativity begins to spark not because you're forcing it, but because you've created the conditions where it can emerge naturally. Let's apply this to your daily creative practice. When you feel stuck, ask yourself, have I given myself any space to think today? Have I allowed boredom, or have I filled every moment? When was the last time I followed a question without knowing the answer? You may discover that your creative block isn't a lack of ideas, it's a lack of mental room for ideas to land. You can also use curiosity to overcome creative resistance. When you feel afraid or uncertain, curiosity softens the pressure. It lets you say, I don't know if this will work, but let's see where it goes. That mindset lowers the stakes. It invites experimentation. It makes the process feel like an adventure instead of a test. And this brings us to a powerful creative truth. Innovation is not born from knowing. It's born from not knowing and being willing to explore anyway. When you stop needing the perfect idea, the perfect plan, or the perfect result, when you let go of the need for certainty, you unlock your ability to create something truly new. Because what is innovation if not the courage to ask, what hasn't been done yet, and to sit with the discomfort of not having an immediate answer? So don't run from boredom. Don't silence your questions. Don't chase certainty so hard that you lose your sense of wonder. Instead, invite boredom into your day. Give your mind room to stretch. Let your curiosity wander. And trust that in that gentle, patient space, your most original ideas will begin to surface. You don't need more stimulation. You need more stillness. You don't need better answers. You need braver questions. And you don't need to wait for inspiration. You just need to listen, because your mind, when quieted and curious, knows how to lead you to places you've never been. Chapter 6. Creativity in Everyday Life. When people hear the word creativity, many still imagine it living only in certain domains: art, music, writing, design, or tech innovation. They picture artists in studios, authors hunched over laptops, or inventors sketching in notebooks. And while those are certainly creative acts, they represent only a small fraction of where creativity truly lives. The reality is this: creativity is not a role. It's a mindset, a way of seeing, engaging, and shaping the world around you. Creativity doesn't just belong in galleries, theaters, or innovation labs. It belongs in your life. In how you approach a conversation, cook a meal, solve a scheduling conflict, decorate your home, lead a meeting, or even raise your children. Wherever there is a challenge, a choice, or a moment of care, creativity has a place. And once you realize this, your entire relationship with creativity begins to shift. It's no longer something you have to find time for outside your real life. It becomes how you live your life. Let's start with something simple: problem solving. Every day, you face small and large problems. Maybe a deadline moved up, your child forgot their lunch, or your colleague misunderstood your email. In those moments, you can react habitually, or you can respond creatively. Creativity in problem-solving doesn't always mean inventing something new. Often, it means staying flexible, seeing from another perspective, questioning assumptions, or combining familiar elements in an unfamiliar way. It means asking not just, what's wrong, but what could work instead, or what hasn't been tried yet. For example, say you're trying to motivate your team at work. Traditional incentives aren't working. You could default to frustration, or you could get creative. What if you introduced a weekly challenge with fun rewards? What if you asked them directly what motivates them and co-created the structure together? What if you gamified the workday? These aren't artistic decisions, they're creative choices. Choices rooted in curiosity, imagination, and intention. Now, let's zoom in on relationships. Relationships thrive when we bring creativity into how we communicate, connect, and care. Think about how you express appreciation. Do you say thank you out of habit? Or do you occasionally write a note, leave a small surprise, or plan something unexpected? Creativity in relationships is about presence. It's about asking thoughtful questions, telling stories, trying new experiences together, and being willing to see each other anew even after years. You don't need grand gestures, a handwritten message, a spontaneous compliment, a different route home so you have more time to talk. These little creative acts deepen bonds. They show effort. They show love. Even self-care benefits from creativity. If you're burned out, stressed, or feeling stuck, it's easy to reach for the same coping mechanisms, scrolling, zoning out, or numbing. But what if you asked, what's a small, creative way I can recharge today? It could be dancing to one song with your eyes closed. It could be rearranging your room for better flow. It could be writing a letter to your future self. These are not tasks, they're expressions, and they reconnect you with your vitality. Creativity also changes how you relate to routine. We often think of routine as the opposite of creativity, but that's not true. Routine becomes a problem when it's unconscious, but when approached creatively, even the most repetitive moments become opportunities for expression. Think about making breakfast. Most days, it's something you rush through, but what if, once a week, you made it an art, tried a new recipe, plated your food like a chef, listened to a jazz playlist while cooking? Suddenly, it's not just a task, it's a canvas. Or consider how you get dressed. Do you throw on clothes out of habit, or do you sometimes treat it as a way to play with color, texture, identity? These moments may seem small, but they accumulate. They shape how you feel, how you move through the day, how you relate to yourself and the world. The more you approach life with creative attention, the more alive it feels. Now, let's turn to the domain of work. Even if your job doesn't seem creative, chances are you use creativity all the time. You just haven't named it that way. Every time you write an email, lead a meeting, navigate a team conflict, or pitch an idea, you're creating. You're shaping communication. You're translating ideas. You're making judgment calls and designing experiences. You may not be painting murals, but you're making micro decisions that influence culture, connection, and outcomes. And the more you see yourself as creative in your work, the more engaged and empowered you become. You stop going through the motions and start approaching problems as opportunities to experiment. You ask, how can we do this differently? Is there a better way? What's a more human approach? This mindset shift doesn't just benefit you, it benefits your team, your organization, and everyone you serve. Because creativity is contagious. When one person brings curiosity, energy, and fresh thinking into a system, others start to respond in kind. A meeting with one creative thinker becomes a collaborative brainstorm. A team project becomes a chance to test new tools, workflows, or approaches. So, if you've ever said, "I'm just not in a creative job," look again. Creativity isn't limited by your title, it's invited by your perspective. Let's not forget parenting and family life, either. Raising children may be one of the most creative acts of all. You are literally helping shape a human life. You're solving problems on the fly, telling stories, answering big questions, and constantly adapting to change. Every tantrum, every homework crisis, every bedtime negotiation is an opportunity to bring patience, play, and imagination into the mix. And modeling creativity for your children is one of the greatest gifts you can give them. Let them see you experiment. Let them see you make art not to be perfect, but to be expressive. Let them hear you ask questions, try new things, and embrace mistakes. This teaches them that creativity isn't a skill you have or don't have. It's a way of being that they can carry for life. In fact, the best way to nurture a child's creativity is to keep nurturing your own. Now, let's address a common question. But what if I don't have time for creativity in daily life? The answer is simple. Creativity doesn't require extra time. It requires a different approach to the time you already have. Brushing your teeth? Reflect on an idea instead of checking your phone. Commuting? Observe the world around you. What patterns do you see? What stories could you tell from that scene? Shopping for groceries? Try cooking something you've never made. Notice the colors of the produce. Imagine a meal as an act of expression, not just survival. Creativity is not another task on your list. It's a different lens for the tasks already there. It's about bringing intention to the ordinary. And the more you do that, the more your life becomes art, not because it's glamorous or polished, but because it's fully lived. Let's be clear. This isn't about romanticizing every moment. Life will still be messy, frustrating, and unpredictable. You'll still have bad days, hard conversations, and mundane chores. But creativity gives you a choice in how you engage with those moments. You can drift through your day on autopilot, or you can ask, how can I bring a little more presence, a little more play, a little more perspective into this? Sometimes that means finding beauty in the mess. Sometimes it means laughing at the absurdity. Sometimes it means seeing a familiar thing in a new light. That's the essence of creativity in everyday life. A willingness to pay attention and respond with intention. So where can you begin? Start by choosing one part of your day and treating it as a canvas. Maybe it's your morning routine, your next work meeting, your lunch break, or your commute. Ask, how can I bring a little creative energy into this? You don't need to make something grand. You just need to make something yours. Play with it. Be curious. Don't overthink it. The more you do this, the more creativity becomes your default, not because you're forcing it, but because you've trained your mind to look for possibility. And that's when real transformation happens. You stop compartmentalizing your creativity. You stop saving it for weekends, for side projects, for later. You start living it fully, daily, in all the little choices that make up a life. Because the truth is, you are creating all the time. The way you shape your schedule, the way you speak to your partner, the way you organize your desk, the way you respond when things don't go your way. These are all creative acts. They are your signature on the world. So what do you want that signature to say? That you lived passively or creatively? That you waited for inspiration or created it in your everyday moments? You don't need to be in a studio to make art. You don't need to be in a lab to innovate. You don't need to be an expert to experiment. You just need to show up to your life with eyes open, mind curious, and heart willing. Because when you do, you realize creativity isn't something separate from life. Creativity is how life comes alive. By now, you've seen the truth that lives beneath the surface of creativity. It's not a talent for the chosen few. It's a muscle, a mindset, a decision you make day after day, moment after moment, to meet the world not with passivity, but with possibility. The world will give you every reason to wait, to doubt, to scroll, to shrink. It will tell you to be practical, to play safe, to follow the script. But deep inside you, there's a voice that wants to make, not just consume, to express, not just perform, to shape your life with color, care, and courage. That voice is your creative core. And it's always been there. You don't need a title. You don't need permission. You don't need to feel ready. You just need to show up and begin. Begin with 5 minutes. Begin with one idea. Begin before you're confident. Because what matters isn't the size of your effort, it's the consistency of your return. Create when it's easy, and especially when it's not. Create when the outcome is unclear, when you're tired, when you're inspired, when you're uncertain, when no one is watching. Because every time you create, you become a little braver, a little freer, a little more in touch with your own voice. And that voice, your voice, is needed. Not because it's perfect, but because it's honest, because it carries something only you can bring into the world. So let go of waiting for the ideal time. Let go of comparing, doubting, delaying, and simply create anyway. Create through your habits, your choices, your conversations, your problem solving, your presence. Infuse your everyday life with imagination, with curiosity, with care. Not someday, not when you feel like it, not when it's guaranteed to succeed. Create today, create now. Because the creative life isn't about a single masterpiece. It's about the ongoing masterpiece of how you choose to live. And you're the artist. So, go on. Start small, stay steady, make it yours. And whatever happens, keep creating every day, anyway.